Thank you for joining us with something to talk about here at the Bainbridge Island Senior Center and Community Center, I should say. And today we welcome Chris Stanley to talk about his life of creating things as a professional model maker. The ultimate maker, Chris is now a fixture at BARN, Bainbridge Artisans Resource Network, crossing between studios in the role of both teacher and learner. Good morning, Chris. And listen, when did you start modeling?
Well, as early as I can remember, when I was about 4, I found a plastic model kit of an airplane that the instructions had been lost. And so I asked my parents, nobody else is going to put this thing together. Can I just try my luck at this? So I had leftover parts, but I did have something that looked like an airplane when I was complete.
That's awesome. So that's so you were kind of a natural, and I mean, just the fact that you were curious about that model without the instructions meant that you had spatial kind of a talent that you wanted to explore that. So that's awesome. So where did it lead you?
So by the time I was in high school, my crafts teacher had a friend who was a landscape architect and was looking for a scale model for a landscape idea he had for a fair. Yeah, so the local mall had a thing where people could exhibit things, and so his name was Herbert S. Frank. He had a landscaping company, and so he waved his hands around and said he was looking for a model like a samurai house out of Japan. And so I went to the library and I found an example, a book that had really good pictures in it and a few plan views and things like that to build this. And so I came back with an estimate and he said, okay. And so I started work and it took longer than I thought. The most complicated was the curved roof, which I had made a small sample to try out an idea, and worked great on the small sample, but did not work on the about 18-inch wide model that I did. And so I'd start over with the roof. And so I ended up doing twice the number of hours that I had anticipated.
Yeah.
So let me show some pictures.
Oh, we'd love that.
So so I've been a model maker for a while. Everything I needed to know, I learned in making models, sort of like I learned in kindergarten. So that's me at 4 weeks with my brother Vincent, and we're sitting in an Ames chair, which is probably one of the first pieces of furniture my parents bought, which is a significant design thing. This was back in the 50s. Oh, 1954. And now I've told how old I am. So I had an uncle who was into making things. So there is Vincent and me, and we're not sure which one is which because we'd gone to Disneyland and got these tri-corner hats. But my uncle Levone is making pitons there. He was a mountain climber, and we're turning the crank on the forge. And so I grew up in a time of interesting technology. So 1969, the first men landed on the moon. And so what was I doing? I was building models. So Revell had a great kit, which had Mercury and it had all these different models in it. And the last thing was the Saturn V and a lunar lander. And so I bought the big kit. So this is the first model that I was paid to do. This was at Hillsdale Mall in San Mateo, California. There actually was a picture of it in the local paper. And so things that went right. I came up with great plans with little direction, got great encouragement from my arts and crafts teachers at school who saw me working on the model. I was in an unusual school that had a certain amount of free time. And so you could go into a deeper level on certain things. The model came out looking really good, and I pictured the model made in the local paper. I learned from my art teacher that there are professional model makers who do this kind of work for a living. He said, you know, you could do that. Things that went wrong. Problem with the roof. I had to build it twice. It was the hardest part of the model. The model took longer to build than I anticipated. I worked a 22-hour day to get it delivered late, but in time for the show. The client did not return my calls till I sent him a bill in the mail for twice of the original estimate. He called me back, said he nearly had a heart attack when he got the bill. We negotiated a lower price. It was more than my original estimate, but less. So I think I made about $1.35 an hour, something like that. The minimum wage at the time was, I think, $1.35. So that was a way. Too much stress, not enough money. I vowed I'd never again make a model for money. Well, I found it wasn't so bad after all. There are worse things to do in life than making models. So in 74, I called up, I opened the Yellow Pages. I was getting tired of school. I made the mistake of taking a quarter with no art classes. It was all academics, and it was driving me crazy. So I looked at the largest ad in the Yellow Pages, and I called up Scale Models Unlimited, and I talked to Chuck Briggs, and he said, don't drop out of school. Come see them in the summertime. They always have some summertime work. So I worked there for a number of years. When I came back that summer, Chuck didn't remember me. Of course, they get lots of people who call. But I think they liked the fact that I'd only been paid $2 an hour at that point. And so they hired me at $2 an hour. And 3 months later, I was making more than that. So it was interesting. I'm dyslexic, and I had problems in school. And so it was the first time in my life that I was doing things faster than other people. Because models is a place where dyslexic shine. That's an MX missile testing site there. That is a casino for Caesar's Palace, Atlantic City.
Wow.
And there was an environmental statement made for this, and it was rejected by the Environmental Commission. It was too garish for Atlantic City. And that's a federal penitentiary there somewhere.
Wow.
We made 2 of these. These were Coast Guard boats. Normally what they would do is buy a full-size brand new boat and cut holes in it to show all the safety equipment you should have on your boat. And this was for Alaska, where they don't have roads to everywhere. And so this was designed to be small enough to fit into a twin otter plane. It was 6 feet long. The estimate was way out. He thought, oh, 1/3 scale model be big enough we can buy stuff. I bought the cleats and the horn. Everything else had to be made. So we had someone make the life jackets, stuff like that. It was fun. For this, my drawings was a set of Coast Guard regulations. The one on the left here was for NASA. This was a centrifuge they had for testing parts, and it had so many different axes, nobody could understand it from the drawings. So we built a model. Actually, I think we built about 20 models, and they were sent to various institutions. There's a picture of a younger me, and that's a piece to check fitting for an airplane that had a radar dome on the top of it. And so they wanted to see what the clearances were for the equipment. And this was for the Japanese Space Agency, a satellite model. And that's Don Nussbaum, the principal's hand there. And this is my pride and joy. So this is a model of it completed on the left here. Upper right, that's me hanging off the internal structure. This was in the Smithsonian Institution for many years. And then below that is my largest airplane model, had a 16-foot wingspan. That's the model itself. And this is, again, an aircraft that had a radar dome on the top of it. And this was flame sprayed with a metallic coating so they could check the radar interference from the plane to the electronics. And that's a picture from the Smithsonian. It took me about 3 or 4 years before I got out to the Smithsonian, but I took a lot of pictures of it sitting there. It is no longer in the Smithsonian. I've been replaced by Julia Child's Kitchen.
Well,
The exhibit got shrunk. The piece you see that has that thing hanging over it, that's the original apparatus. That's the historical thing. Mine is the big mock-up. It's a big electromagnet. This was an accelerator of atomic particles. It was the second cyclotron ever built. It was used during the Manhattan Project to help develop the atomic bomb. The original weighs 20 tons, too heavy for the floor of the Smithsonian, and is in the parking lot of the Lawrence Hall of Science in Berkeley, California.
so did you work with the Ames Research, or what NASA facility did you work with?
So I worked for Scale Models Unlimited, and
okay.
Ames was just down the street from us. So we did stuff for them. I did a model for the Jupiter flyby of the Voyager, which was interesting.
Oh my gosh.
So it's interesting the ties you have to history. And as a model maker, you often build stuff before it is made. And so you get to see the future.
Right.
Speaking of future, down in the lower left-hand corner, that's a 3.5-inch floppy disk, which was brand new at the time I was making that model. I'm aging myself again. And
we're all there with you, Chris.
That's a hard drive, the other two pictures there. This was an early inter-office communication device, which you could type on the keyboard there and send what would now be an email to someone in the corporation. This was for the European market. They didn't want a fan in it. And so you can see by the lower right component there, it had a lot of vents. So the two pictures on the right are what we call a documentation check model. And so that was to check fit and function. And so that was plus or minus 5/1000ths of an inch, which is just slightly thicker than a piece of paper. So the one on the left is just an appearance model to show what the final thing should look like. I'm not seeing a clock. Another inter-office messaging device down at the bottom, intercom. The one above it is the check model. The one below is the appearance model. There's a full-size model. There was some sort of, I think, memory storage device for radiographics, so x-rays and stuff like that. They were going to digitize them. It was a new idea, digitizing, so they could get rid of all these very heavy, very large x-rays.
Yes.
And then the company was going to give you this device for free in exchange for your x-rays. The x-ray sheets are full of silver.
Yeah.
So they were essentially going to mine your old x-rays.
Yeah, there you go.
Turn them back into silver. This was a lovely personal computer. This is Falco. We generally don't present the models to the client, the industrial designers. So I was working for an industrial design firm, which is no longer around, called GVO. They were in Palo Alto as well. And so, we get the model ready, we give it to the designers. They front conference room is used to present the model to the client. And usually, you know, we don't hear anything about it. We can talk to the designers later and ask how it went. And in this case, we got called up to the conference room, and the client shook our hands and said it was the best model he had ever received.
Wow.
Which was really a high compliment. So little things that you have to do with a model like this. In order to get the keycaps the right color, we paint them. When you paint them, you remove all the letters. So we used press type to put all the letters back on. We had custom press type, so get the colors. A lot of work.
Yeah.
Then I got married, and my wife owed 3 years of her life to the federal government for her medical degree. And so we went to North Carolina for about 4 years. We stayed an extra year so she could get a MPH in maternal and child health. So this is a sort of like a walkie-talkie. This, I don't think anybody can tell you what that is. This was for the company Homelight. This is a shoot for a lawnmower.
Oh, I see that.
And then we moved to Seattle, and I moved into education, and I ended up educating designers to be model makers. And so this is actually the last picture taken before I was in a nearly fatal bicycle versus automobile accident. The one on the left, I showed students how to take an object that they made in the computer, convert it into a thing that can be cut with a laser. So they designed it to fold flat, and then it could be cut out, and then they'd reassemble it in real life. And so that was a sock monkey head. And then I worked with students to build cars out of clay. So that actually is out of auto styling clay, which is a wax-based clay. So it never really gets hard, but you just warm it to work with it.
That's gorgeous.
And so I have graduates working at Ford and Honda.
And you taught at the UW?
No, at the Art Institute of Seattle.
Art Institute. Okay.
No longer exists.
Yeah. Too bad.
Well, it went downhill before it died.
Yeah. Too bad.
The instructors weren't terribly sad to see it go.
No.
But at the time we were doing all this fun stuff, we had people who had graduates from the University of Washington who came to us to get a second degree in industrial design.
There you go. Yeah.
And so there is a little air motor. It's like a steam engine. And that one there has 3 pistons to it, the one on the left. And so that starts on its own because there's always a place where it can start. And then here's a clay model of like a Vespa. And they also put an LED light in it, which is kind of fun. Then this is a model I built with Alec Vasiliadis, another model maker on Bainbridge Island. And this building has now been built. It has been purchased by a major computer manufacturer. This is going to be their Seattle headquarters. And actually, that's the final building.
Lovely.
You can see the diagonal columns there that were very notable in the model. I also do set design. Before everything cut down in the theatrical world, one of my former students was doing The Night of the Living Dead live, which is kind of interesting because that's actually a color photograph.
Oh, wow.
The play is done in black and white, and so the set is monochromatic. And so he was looking all over for a 60s era television set, and nobody would loan him one that he could paint black and white. And so I said, well, I'll build you one. And so that's there, and I put LEDs in it so we could make it light up when they turned it on.
Hmm.
Let's see, Narnia. So that's the Ice Queen. And there's this sled I made for her. And the last project I worked on, this is the Kitsap Forest Theater, was Newsies. And so this is the largest set piece I've ever made. So if you look at the little girl in the midpoint of that thing there, when she's done, she's standing on a board right there, which is hinged, and then that board will disappear.
Oh,
So I painted it to look like the wall,
yeah.
and it just disappears when she lifts it up.
That's fabulous, Chris. Oh my gosh.
So that's the end of there. Well, how are we doing on time?
It's 11:52, so.
Good. So now you just talk to me, because that's.
Oh, good. We have questions. So you're done sharing? Great. So I think that Sheila had a lot of questions. Sheila.
That large thing that you said was the love of your life, the most important thing you've ever done in your world, with a cyclotron.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that at all.
So a cyclotron is an accelerator of atomic particles.
Okay,
I got the job because I explained to the salesperson, I'm the only person in the shop who knows what a cyclotron is and what it does. So I got to be the job captain. So an atomic particle, it's the little things that everything's made out of. And so, a tetherball?
Yes.
Okay, so this is using magnets to do what you do with a tetherball. So that large structure is holding the atomic particles to the center of this. And then they put magnetic impulses from the side, like you tap that thing around. And so it starts it moving around until it gets enough energy, it can move out of the strong magnetic field. And so there's a plasma stream, a stream of atomic particles that comes out of one end of the machine.
Is that go down below then into that mechanism that's below?
Well, the mechanism is what the atomic particles were held in, and that was in a high vacuum.
What? But you had the thing that was above it, the archway thing.
Yeah, that was the large magnet, which holds things to the center.
That holds it to the center. Okay, and the picture you had on that one at the same time was over on the left-hand side, was in color. Is that the cyclotron itself?
Now I have to look at the picture. And I closed it.
I think I need to go and take some physics.
Ah.
But
Yeah.
that was kind of an unusual one, Chris, I think, because you were doing it after the fact, whereas most of your models are anticipating the future, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
that was
Oh,
museums like to show history.
right.
Most people want models to see what the future is going to look like.
Yes. Yes. Hey, what do you do over at the barn?
So I teach. I've taught making sourdough crackers in culinary.
Oh, I love it.
I teach a number of classes in the jewelry program. I was used a lot in their COC, which is teaching apprentices for the jewelry industry. So I've taught using a cuttlefish, that little bone you put in parakeet's cage, you can use that to cast to metal. It's refractory. And so I showed how to use that to cast things. I taught a class in that. I'll be teaching classes in soldering and sawing and things like that. Also taught a class in how to design jewelry in CAD, computer-aided design, in Rhinoceros, which is a program which is used extensively in the jewelry industry.
Do you ever end up in the woodworking part?
They have a CNC router
Mhm.
in woodworking, and so I've taught people how to make boxes, oval boxes. Of course, you don't make anything square when you got a CNC with the
Exactly.
people's initials on top.
Oh, that's-
I've taught CAD classes in the let's see what we call it. I blank on names occasionally. In the electronics program,
Mhm.
I've taught some computer-aided design classes. But the place where I've taught the most is machining
Okay.
and sheet metal. So I taught a lot of sheet metal classes, how to make boxes, how to make a dustpan, things like that. And then we make tops. I show how to use the CNC equipment, teach people how to run. We have several programs that will convert a three-dimensional design file into something that will run a machine. And
Mhm.
so I've done that, and I've cut dies and then stamped copper into that. And so then that we make stuff with in jewelry. I've also taught machining to jewelers, so you can make little pill boxes and things like that.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you just are like a butterfly all over the barn. You just flip from one studio to another.
Model makers are generalists,
Yes.
and so
Could we come over and just watch?
actually, on Wednesday evenings we're doing an open studio, and so I just have a open studio and a virtual open studio. In the virtual open studio, I've been doing projects, and just people can watch. So I've made a holder for my bicycle light, my tail light, which I had gotten a replacement, but it didn't fit on my thing that I normally put stuff on. So I made an adapter.
Of course you did.
Of course,
Of course.
I'm an inventor.
I love it. I absolutely love this. What does your big brother think about this? Here he's sitting here just smiling like crazy.
You have to unmute yourself, Vincent.
Well, I'm learning a lot that I never knew before.
Is that right?
I'm
Wow.
a proud big brother.
Oh,
We had a difficult childhood, and generally when I would make a model, I wouldn't let Vincent touch it, because if he touched it, it usually broke.
Oh,
That's true today of anything I touch, but most of them is not models. Yeah.
well, the family secrets come out, huh?
So,
Well, I know that when I was growing up in what was then rural Whidbey Island, I knew a number of men who would machine things or figure things out when they would come across a problem that had, some equipment that was out of date. They just make something to make it work. It sounds like that's something you enjoy. It's a lost art in a world where we're taught to throw away things when they don't work anymore.
But my wife asks me, well, when other people try to build a piece of our IKEA furniture and it doesn't fit together properly, what do they do? Because I'll take it over to the table saw and make it fit. And I'll say, well, usually they get discouraged and they send it back, or they don't know what to do. And I just make things work. I'm a maker.
yep.
What do you do when that happens?
People, oh,
What do you do?
I
What do
make
you-
it work.
You just make it work, okay?
I modify it. I'll cut it down so that it's the right size. I'll make an adapter. I can do, when people want something that hasn't been made yet, they hire me.
Mhm.
So
And,
when I
and how do we reach you so we can hire you?
Barn, if you talk to the people in the metal shop at Barn.
Okay.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I'll tell you, one of the, the 7 intelligences is one of them spatial, and that's a very rare one you have, Chris. I think that's why we have a lot of questions, because we don't have that gift.
So I'm dyslexic, and what dyslexia does is it gives me tremendous understanding of three-dimensional orientation, how things come together,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes it impossible for me to spell things correctly.
Yep.
So I'm
We all have our
a
strengths.
terrible speller. People ask me, well, what is it that you can't do? And I go, spell.
Well, I'm going to tell my great grandson about that because he's just been diagnosed as dysplegia, dyslexia. So he's got both.
Mhm.
A lot of model makers have dyslexia. It's not an uncommon trait. which
Well, he loves
because-
putting things together.
Yeah. My grandparents, people would give them puzzles, three-dimensional puzzles that would drive them crazy. And they'd say, this is for Christopher when he comes to visit.
Oh, a piece of cake for you,
Yeah.
or a challenge, which you love.
But I got to go.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us, Christopher. And Vincent, thanks you for coming along and giving moral support. Is that what it is? We're making Chris nervous.